It's funded by the National Science Foundation and is targeted on science materials, middle school science materials. So quite a bit of what you do, it depends on who your funds come from. So the Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Ed is interested in students with vision impairments. They get money for that, so you write a grant that applies to that. And NSF is interested in science materials for Spanish speakers and so forth. So we have a group that's looking at reading strategies in online environments. We have lots of strategies for how to read a printed book. What are the strategies for reading an electronic book that's online? And it's a different set of skills. It's a new literacy, requires a new literacy. And that's done in collaboration with a group in the University of Connecticut and so forth. So you sort of, Kate also houses the Oregon Writing Project, which is very old. It's been running for 30 years. It used to be run by a man named Teich, who was a professor in the English department, and he retired, and they needed somebody to. So Lynn became the director of it, and then it sort of moved administratively over here, and now they're doing technology. Do you know about Second Life? Second Life is this, I wouldn't call it a video game, but it's a three-dimensional virtual world that's user created.
Yeah, I remember they showed in like 5.
You have avatar. You have an avatar.
Oh, okay.
Right, and so you go in and you get a piece of property and you can build buildings and make clothes and all sorts of things. You can do whatever you would want to do, and people do whatever they want to do. So we're using Second Life. We have a project. We have funding. Can't remember who it's from, but so the Oregon Writing Project is a spin-off from the Bay Area Writing Project that started down in San Francisco 40 years ago. And now there's writing projects all over the country, and it's based on the notion that people who teach writing will be better teachers of writing if they are better writers themselves. And so they do projects to bring teachers together to improve their own writing skills. The main activity they have is a 4-week summer institute. But we have a project to try to reach out to writing teachers in rural areas that don't have close access to a peer group to get together for those kinds of activities. So they're using Second Life for the meeting space.
Oh, wow.
And so rather than meet face-to-face, which involves driving many hours, they meet in Second Life. So you can see there's a variety of different kinds of projects.
Cool. Okay, so then next question would be, what would you say is maybe the philosophy and purpose of Kate, if you had to put it just into like a small statement, like the overall philosophy and purpose?
We're investigating applications of technology in educational settings.
Okay.
That's,
I like that.
there's a website, and there's probably words to that effect on the kate.uoregon.edu website.
Checked it out a little bit.
But that's basically it. Now it comes with some caveats under there. It's funded by external funding, which means you're doing certain kinds of things and not certain other kinds of things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we don't do everything there is to be done in technology. It's a huge field. We carve off our own little pieces. But that's what we're about.
Okay, and then what is your specific role here as a member of
I am the principal investigator for the Metric Project.
Okay.
I am the assistant director, or we have a huge number of titles that change every time we think of it. So my role is to work on these grants. So I work on writing the grants, I work on administering the grants, I work on doing the work of the grant. And exactly what I do is different from grant to grant.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the Estrellas grant, the one with Spanish speakers, I'm only on that for 4 or 5 hours a week. So my main task is to go to the meetings and pontificate, well, why don't you try doing this or doing that? I help out with the people who are designing and conducting the research. I help them with their research design. So it's much more of an advisory role on electric project, I'm on that half-time, and so I run it. And so it's been going for just over a year now, and mostly what I've been doing is administrative work around setting up the contracts, because we're going to flow all this money out to everybody else. It turns out giving away money is harder than it seems, because there's lots of rules. Everybody has rules. So right now, if you see that list on the wall over there, those are all contracts that are in some state of becoming. And that's only the ones that are sort of, there's a list that long that are already running, and a list that long that need to start sometime in the spring. So I spend my time working with the people who are doing the research, like at Purdue or Kentucky or Boston. They have to make a research plan, they have to make a budget, and then Washington has to approve that, and our business office here has to approve that. The business office at their university has to approve that. And if it involves human subjects, which all of them do, then you have to get a human subjects protocol, and somebody has to approve that, and so
you just kind of make sure it's flowing.
So my job is to keep all of that flowing. We are just in the process of starting the research project that we want to do here, which is going to look at algebra classes and students with learning disabilities. And so I had I think in Eugene they're called TOSAs. For each one of the subject areas, 4J has a teacher who spends half-time teaching and half-time managing that subject area for the district. So 4J, for example, just adopted new textbooks for their 8th grade algebra classes. And these are very interesting books. These books are a mashup of 3 other textbooks. Where they got permission to cut and paste from all of these other textbooks to make these 2. So our plan is to go into the schools and just work sort of in a tutorial role with individual students to try to see how they interact with these texts and how they interact with all the other kinds of textual materials that are in play in those classrooms. And out of that, we hope to see if we were going to build an electronic version of those books or something similar. What kinds of resources would they need to have in them? So we're just getting ready to start doing that. 4J, of course, like all the school districts, is under enormous pressure at the moment. Some of the teachers we work with have already gotten notification that they're likely to be laid off in June. And the cutoff scores for the standardized tests have just been raised. There's a brand new textbook, a new curriculum. I mean, it's everybody's under a huge amount of stress, and we don't want to add to that. So we're trying to figure out how we can work in the schools in a way that is not just another burden. And so we're thinking this model of going in to tutor students. Just sit down with this. They have in some of the schools, middle schools, they've got a special sort of homework period that LD kids attend. They're mainstreamed into a math class, and they also have this tutorial period. So we're thinking that we would sit down with them or bring in graduate students or somebody who would sit down and tutor them. And in the process of tutoring them, or helping them with their homework or whatever, you can see where that little pen comes in.
Yeah.
So now we're going to, let's just do our homework on this pen. So now I get this takeaway of their stuff. So my role in different grants is I don't spend too much time in the schools anymore. We have another project that's coming to an end where what we're trying to do is a bunch of literature searches. We're trying to take each one of the components of this supported text construct and see what the literature says, what's already known about that, and then get a group of experts from around the country who would look at that. So we go out and find all the papers that have been written about that, sort of triage them down to a core, and then have these panel of experts read that core and then discuss. What are the key findings that are generally agreed to? What are the open questions? What should the future research agenda be? So the first of our study groups is supposed to kick off tomorrow. So we're running around right now trying to get all of the
Yeah.
materials ready, and that'll run. And then we're going to run 7 more by September of next year, and that's for another project. And the Metric is going to do a similar thing, so it's got a different crew of people that are starting to gear up to do the same sort of thing.
Wow, lots going on. So then, if someone was interested in this type of a role or a job, what kind of education or background or training would you like suggest for them to be successful?
Well, if they're going to do what I do, they have to go get a PhD. My rank at the university is what's called a senior research associate, which is an equivalent to an associate professor, but without tenure. So if I run out of grants, then I run out of a job. And I have taught. There was a period about 5 years ago where a colleague and I taught all of the pre-service technology classes in all the teacher ed programs
Wow.
from the university, and that's changed where right now we're not teaching at all. So we've done of that. So at some periods, my job, what I actually do, looks exactly like a regular faculty member. It's just that I'm not in that tenure track. So you would need to, and the University of Oregon is very different than most universities in that it has this large contingent, like 200 people like me, not
Wow.
only PhDs, but there's 28 senior research associates, and there's 28 research associates. To be a research associate, you have to have a PhD. If you only have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, you can become a research assistant. Research assistants tend to do more of the day-to-day grunt work of a project as opposed to the designing of it. Although when you become a senior research assistant or a senior research assistant too, then we have people here whose actual work is not all that different than mine. They just don't have that credential. If you're a senior research associate, that's sort of the second rank that I am. You have the authority to write your own grants. If you're only a research associate, you can still be the principal investigator on a grant, but you have to get special permission from the university each time to do that. And that's usually not too hard to get. We have several people doing precisely that right now. So most people who, if you want to do research about what's happening in the schools, it's usually a good idea for people to be teachers. Most people that end up in our ranks have been classroom teachers, at least for a while. We have a couple of people who haven't here. So there are many career paths, but the typical thing is that